On March 17, 2023, at approximately 8:47 a.m., Patricia Chen, a floor manager at the Grand Sierra Casino in Reno, Nevada, opened the vault for the morning cash count and immediately noticed something was wrong. 7 sealed money bags, containing the casino's weekly high-value earnings waiting for armored transport, were missing. In total, $72 million had vanished from a vault that had never been opened. The steel door had remained sealed throughout the night. Every biometric lock showed negative readings. Motion sensors registered no movement. Weight-sensitive floors detected no unauthorized entries. The armored walls showed no breaches. The security system, upgraded at a cost of $42 million just 8 months earlier, had functioned perfectly. And yet the money was gone. This is the story of how a man nobody noticed pulled off one of the most ingenious heists in American history, and how investigators struggled to understand what had actually happened. For 18 years, Ethan Cole worked at the Reno industrial manufacturing plant on the eastern edge of the city, in a sprawling complex of corrugated metal buildings that smelled perpetually of machine oil and hot metal. He was 46 years old, divorced, living alone in a rental house with rusted pipes and a sagging porch on Elm Street. 3 blocks from the railroad tracks where freight trains rattled past at 2 in the morning, his co-workers knew him as the quiet guy who stayed late, who fixed machines nobody else could fix, who smelled like motor oil and rarely talked about his personal life. He had a methodical way of approaching problems, standing motionless in front of a broken machine for long minutes, just observing, before pulling out his tools and working in silence. Other mechanics would curse and bang on equipment. Ethan would study it like he was reading a book written in steel and hydraulics. "Cole's weird," the younger guys would say during lunch breaks. "Barely talks, just stares at machines." But when a critical production line went down and the factory stood to lose thousands of dollars per hour, Mike Brennan, the floor supervisor, always called Ethan first, because whatever was broken, Ethan could fix it. What they didn't know, what nobody at the factory knew, was that Ethan had once been 2 semesters away from a mechanical engineering degree at the University of Nevada. He'd been a solid B-plus student, excelling in courses on hydraulic systems, pressure mechanics, and structural engineering. His professors had told him he had a natural intuition for how systems worked, an ability to visualize forces and stresses in 3 dimensions that couldn't really be taught. He dropped out at 23 when his mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The medical bills arrived like an avalanche: chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Ethan had taken full-time factory work to pay for everything, putting his education on indefinite hold. His mother lived for another 14 months. In that time, Ethan worked 60-hour weeks, visited her every evening after his shift, and watched her deteriorate despite every treatment they tried. She died on a Tuesday morning in October, holding his hand, apologizing for ruining his future. "You didn't ruin anything, Mom," he'd told her. "Don't say that." But they both knew the truth. By the time she died and the bills were finally paid, Ethan was 25 years old with no savings and no realistic path back to college. The factory job had become permanent. The engineering knowledge never left him, though. Every equation about pressure systems, hydraulic mechanics, force distribution, it all remained sharp in his mind, even after nearly 2 decades of using those skills to repair conveyor belts and industrial presses instead of designing them. Ethan's life had become a routine of invisible labor. He clocked in at 6 a.m., worked through lunch most days, stayed until 7 or 8 p.m. fixing equipment that had broken during the day shift. He worked overtime constantly, not because he loved the job, but because there was nothing else. No hobbies, no social life, no real friends except for his co-worker Danny, who occasionally invited him for beers that Ethan usually declined. His daughter Emma lived with his ex-wife Sandra in Portland, Oregon. He saw her twice a year if he was lucky. A weekend in summer, sometimes Christmas if Sandra was feeling generous about the custody arrangement. Emma was 17 now, a senior in high school, brilliant and driven in ways that reminded Ethan painfully of his younger self. His marriage to Sandra had ended 6 years earlier, in 2017, after 15 years of slow deterioration. She'd wanted a partner who came home for dinner, who talked about his day, who was present for more than just bill paying and weekend errands. Ethan had tried, But the factory demanded his time, and somewhere along the way he'd forgotten how to be anything except a mechanic who solved problems. "I feel like I'm married to a ghost," Sandra had told him during their last real conversation before the lawyers got involved. "You're never really here, Ethan, even when you're sitting right next to me." She wasn't wrong. Ethan had become very good at being invisible. Now in 2022, the factory was dying. The owners, a private equity firm that had purchased Reno Industrial 5 years earlier, were cutting costs aggressively. They'd laid off the accounting staff and outsourced payroll. They'd eliminated the maintenance budget and expected mechanics like Ethan to keep ancient equipment running with salvage parts. Quality control had been reduced to a single inspector. The writing was on the wall. The factory would close within 2 years, maybe less. Ethan knew he'd be cast aside like a worn-out machine part. 18 years of expertise, of fixing the impossible, of keeping the plant running, none of it would matter. They'd give him 2 weeks severance and a handshake, and that would be the end. Sometimes, lying in bed at night listening to freight trains rumble past, Ethan would calculate how much money he'd earned the factory over 18 years. Millions of dollars in prevented downtime. Equipment that would have cost hundreds of thousands to replace, fixed instead with his knowledge and skill. His annual salary, $52,000. The math didn't work out in his favor. In July 2022, on a Tuesday morning that felt like every other Tuesday morning, Ethan's supervisor, Mike Brennan, called him into the office. Mike was a good guy, mid-50s, worn down by decades of factory work, but still trying to do right by his people. He had pictures of his grandkids taped to his filing cabinet and a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest boss." "Got a special job for you, Cole," Mike said, pulling out a manila folder. "The Grand Sierra Casino is wrapping up their renovation project. We won the bid to install custom ventilation brackets in their service quarters. Simple work, drilling, mounting, making sure everything's level. But they're particular about who they let inside. Security clearance, background check, the whole deal." He slid a badge across the desk, white plastic with a magnetic strip, Ethan's photo printed on the front along with contractor in red letters. "This gets you into the service areas. You'll be working with their facilities team. Job should take about 2 weeks, maybe 6 or 7 visits total. They're paying us premium rates because of the security requirements." Mike leaned back in his chair. "Look, Cole, I'm being straight with you. The company's looking at layoffs again. You're valuable, but you're also expensive because of seniority. This casino job, do it well, show them you can handle premium contracts. Maybe it helps your position when they start making cuts." Ethan took the badge. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Their facilities manager, Rodriguez, will meet you at the service entrance. And Cole?" Mike's expression turned serious. "Stay in the marked corridors. Don't wander around. It's a casino. They've got security everywhere, and they don't mess around. We can't afford to lose this client." Ethan nodded and took the badge. He had no intention of stealing anything. Not then. The thought never even crossed his mind. On Ethan's first day at the casino, the desert sun was already brutal by the time he arrived at 6:55 a.m. The Grand Sierra sprawled across 12 acres of prime Reno real estate. Towers of glass and steel, massive parking structures, elaborate fountains that seemed obscene in the Nevada heat. The service entrance was around back, unmarked except for a small sign reading, "Authorized personnel only." Ethan scanned his badge and the door clicked open. Inside, a security guard sat at a desk. Rodriguez, based on the nameplate. Mid-30s, former military, based on his posture and the way his uniform was pressed. He looked up from his computer and extended a hand. "Ethan Cole, I'm Rodriguez, head of facilities security. Welcome to the Sierra." They shook hands. Rodriguez's grip was firm, professional. "I'll show you to your work area," Rodriguez said, standing. "We take security seriously here, especially after the renovation. This place is locked down tight now." As they walked through the service corridors, Rodriguez explained the project. The casino had spent $42 million upgrading everything. New HVAC systems, upgraded electrical infrastructure, state-of-the-art security. The corridors were clean, well lit, nothing like the grimy industrial spaces Ethan was used to. You'll be working near the vault access area, Rodriguez explained as they walked. But don't worry, you're nowhere near the actual vault. That's on sub-level 2 with its own security protocols. We're talking biometric locks, motion sensors, facial recognition cameras, weight-sensitive floors. Nobody gets in there without authorization from 3 different department heads. Ethan asked casual questions as they walked, the way anyone might when starting a new job. He learned about the renovation timeline, the construction challenges, the new systems being installed. Rodriguez seemed proud of the improvements, happy to talk about them. 42 million in upgrades, Rodriguez said. This place is Fort Knox now. We've got redundant systems, backup power, encrypted access logs. The owner wanted the best security money could buy. He showed Ethan the work area, a service corridor with exposed ductwork and mounting brackets that needed to be installed. Standard job. Boring even. You've got everything you need? Rodriguez asked. Yeah, this is straightforward. I'll start with measurements and layout. Good. I'll check on you in a few hours. Remember, stay in this corridor. If you need a bathroom or anything, just call the desk and someone will escort you. We track all movement in service areas. Rodriguez left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Ethan worked methodically for the next few hours, measuring, marking, drilling pilot holes. The brackets were standard commercial grade, nothing special. By 2:30 p.m., he'd completed about half the installation points. Around 2:45 p.m., he needed to find a bathroom. Rodriguez had said to call, but Ethan saw a corridor that looked like it might lead to facilities. He was a contractor, not a prisoner. He'd just take a quick look. He walked down the side corridor, turned a corner, and found himself in an older section of the building. Concrete walls instead of the renovated drywall, fluorescent lights instead of LEDs. This was clearly part of the original structure. At the end of the corridor, a door stood slightly ajar, leading to stairs going down. Through the gap, Ethan could see machinery in a room below. Large equipment, industrial grade. He knew he shouldn't look. Rodriguez had been clear about staying in authorized areas, but Ethan had spent 18 years fixing machines. The pull was instinctive, magnetic. When you understood how systems worked, seeing machinery was like hearing music. He descended the stairs quietly, carefully, listening for voices or footsteps. The mechanical room at the bottom was old, dusty, clearly not part of the recent renovation. The air smelled like oil and concrete, and in the center of the room sat a hydraulic floor lift system that Ethan recognized immediately. A Mitchell Industries Model 47, manufactured in the early 1980s. Ethan stood absolutely still, his engineer's brain automatically cataloging what he was seeing. The Mitchell 47 was a beast, 12 tons of steel and hydraulic components designed to lift massive loads vertically through floor openings. His factory had 3 of them for moving heavy equipment between levels. He'd rebuilt 2 of them personally, knew every pressure valve, every locking mechanism, every fail-safe system. But this one wasn't lifting factory equipment. Based on the structural reinforcement visible in the ceiling above it, massive steel beams, concrete buttressing, this lift was supporting something extraordinarily heavy directly overhead. The casino vault. Ethan's heart rate increased. He moved closer, studying the system. The pressure valves were Parker-Hannifin Series 300, obsolete but functional. The steel locking rods were 2-inch diameter, hydraulically actuated, designed to lock the platform in place when not in motion. The backup battery system looked original, probably installed in 1982 and never replaced. The control panel had mechanical gauges instead of digital displays, actual analog dials measuring pressure in pounds per square inch. This was 40-year-old technology. The casino had spent $42 million upgrading security systems, installing biometric locks and facial recognition and motion sensors, but they'd built it all on top of this ancient machine because nobody had thought about it. Infrastructure is invisible. The lift had been installed during original construction, covered up by newer systems, forgotten by everyone except the maintenance crew, who probably just checked that it still worked once a year. Ethan approached the control panel. The pressure gauge showed the system was under load, about 180 psi, consistent with supporting a massive weight above. The hydraulic lines showed slight signs of seepage, normal for 40-year-old seals. The locking rods were engaged, visible through a small inspection window. He knelt down, examining the base of the system. The foundation was original construction, poured concrete from the 1980s. The hydraulic reservoir was accessible through a service panel. The electrical connections were old-style copper wiring with cloth insulation. In his mind, Ethan began automatically analyzing the system's vulnerabilities. Not consciously, not with any intent. It was just what his brain did when presented with mechanical systems. Like a musician hearing intervals or a chess player seeing board positions. The Parker-Hannifin valves could be accessed from the side panel. If you had the right adapter, you could redirect pressure without triggering the flow sensors. The locking rods were controlled by a separate hydraulic circuit. Disable that, and you could manipulate the platform position. The mechanical motion sensors were old technology, the kind that could be fooled with magnetic interference. If you understood this system, really understood it, the way Ethan did after 18 years of working with identical equipment, you could manipulate it. You could make the vault floor rise without triggering any of the fancy modern security systems installed above, because the modern security systems didn't know this machine existed. "Hey, what are you doing down here?" Ethan turned to find Rodriguez at the top of the stairs, hand moving toward his radio, face showing alarm and suspicion. Ethan kept his voice calm, natural, like he'd just been curious rather than planning anything. "Sorry, man. I was looking for a bathroom, saw the door open, got curious. I'm a mechanic. Old habits. That's a Mitchell 47, right? We've got some at the factory." Rodriguez came down the stairs quickly, his military bearing now obvious. "This area's not on your access list." "I know, I wasn't touching anything. Just looking." Ethan smiled slightly. "Haven't seen one of these outside work in years. That's original equipment from the 80s, probably installed during initial construction. How's it running?" Rodriguez relaxed slightly. The technical talk helped, made it seem like professional curiosity rather than something suspicious. "It works. Gets serviced annually. Never had problems with it." "The Parker-Hannifin valves are solid," Ethan said. "Probably outlast everything else in the building." After a brief lecture about staying in authorized areas and a reminder about security protocols, Rodriguez escorted Ethan back to his work zone. The incident seemed minor, forgotten within minutes. But for Ethan, everything had changed. That night in his rental house, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with an old engineering notebook from college. One of the few things he'd kept from his university days. The pages were yellowed, filled with equations and diagrams from courses he'd taken 23 years earlier. He opened to a blank page near the back and began sketching from memory. The hydraulic lift system, the pressure distribution, the locking mechanisms, the way the vault floor would rise for armored deliveries. Because, of course, that's what the system was for. Lifting the vault floor to ground level so armored trucks could load and unload without carrying money through the casino. His pencil moved automatically, drawing cross-sections, noting pressure points, calculating load distributions. "This is crazy," he whispered to himself in the silent kitchen. "I'm not a criminal." But his hand kept moving, drawing, calculating. The truth was, Ethan had seen something that nobody else would see. The casino had invested $42 million in modern security, biometric locks, motion sensors, encrypted access controls, facial recognition. But all of it sat on top of a machine from 1982. A machine that Ethan understood better than the security team ever would. A machine that could be manipulated if you knew how. He drew the Parker-Hannifin valve configuration, noting the access points. He sketched the locking rod mechanism, calculating the hydraulic pressure needed to disengage them. He mapped out the electrical systems, identifying which components were monitored and which weren't. Around midnight, Ethan stopped drawing and stared at the sketches. It was possible, not easy, but possible. If you had the right tools, the right knowledge, the right timing, you could bypass $42 million worth of security by exploiting a 40-year-old machine that nobody was watching. Ethan closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. He wasn't going to do this. The thought was insane. He was a mechanic, not a thief. He'd never stolen anything in his life beyond office supplies and the occasional socket wrench that had made its way home by accident. But over the next 2 weeks, as Ethan completed the bracket installation work professionally and on time, He couldn't stop thinking about that hydraulic system. During each visit, he observed, not obviously, not suspiciously, just the natural awareness of someone who understood how buildings worked. He timed security rotations. He noted camera blind spots. He watched armored truck deliveries through service corridor windows and noticed they happened every Tuesday and Friday at 3:15 a.m. He learned that vault access required 3 authorized personnel with biometric verification. He discovered that between 2:45 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., the vault underwent preparation protocols for morning counting operations. Security was active but minimal during this window. Most importantly, he noticed that the mechanical room he'd accidentally discovered was completely isolated from the modern security infrastructure. No cameras, no motion sensors, no access logs. It was old space, forgotten space, invisible to the $42 million upgrade. On his final day of bracket installation, Rodriguez checked his work and signed off on the completion report. "Nice job, Cole. Very clean work. Your supervisor should be happy." "Thanks," Ethan said. "I appreciate you showing me around." Rodriguez smiled. "Stay out of trouble. And hey, if you ever need a reference for other casino work, let me know. We need more contractors who actually give a damn about quality." They shook hands. Ethan packed his tools and left through the service entrance, scanning his contractor badge one last time. The badge that he was supposed to return to Mike, who would return it to the casino. Ethan looked at the white plastic card with his photo, the magnetic strip, the contractor label. Instead of giving it back, he put it in his pocket. The decision to actually plan a heist didn't happen all at once. It came gradually in small steps that felt almost innocent at first. First, Ethan just researched the Mitchell 47 online, downloading technical manuals from industrial supply archives. Just professional curiosity, he told himself, understanding the system better. Then he sketched out theoretical approaches in his notebook. Just intellectual exercise, he reasoned. Problem solving. Then he started thinking about tools that could exploit the system's vulnerabilities. Custom adapters for the Parker-Hannifin valves. Magnetic jamming devices for the motion sensors. Just hypotheticals, but he wasn't actually going to do it. In September 2022, Ethan tested his contractor badge at the casino's service entrance one evening around 10 p.m. He told himself he was just curious if it still worked, if the casino had deactivated it. He scanned the badge. The light turned green. The door unlocked. Ethan stood there for a moment, then walked away without entering. But now he knew the badge still worked. 3 months after the job ended, the casino's system had never deactivated it. That meant something. That meant the vulnerability was real. In October, Ethan drove to the casino late at night, 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, and parked in the service area. He watched for an hour, timing the security rotations, counting the number of times guards walked past the service entrance. Every 45 minutes, like clockwork. He went home and added the information to his notebook. Still just research, still just hypothetical. In November, the factory announced that quarterly profits were down 17%. The owners were evaluating operational efficiency. Everyone knew what that meant. Layoffs were coming. Ethan calculated his severance if he were terminated. 2 weeks' pay, maybe 3 if Mike fought for him. About $4,000 after taxes. His savings account had 2,147.32s. His retirement fund, cashed out with penalties, might give him another $15,000. If he were laid off tomorrow, he'd have about $22,000 to find a new job, relocate if necessary, start over at 46 years old. $22,000. After 18 years. In December 2022, Ethan received an email from his ex-wife Sandra. Their daughter Emma had been accepted to Oregon State University to study engineering, following in her father's abandoned footsteps. Sandra's email was brief, informative, with just a hint of the old tension between them. Emma got into Oregon State engineering program. She's excited. Tuition is $32,000 per year, plus housing and expenses. I've saved $18,000. My parents are contributing $10,000. We're still short, and student loans are brutal. If you can contribute anything, that would help. I know money's tight. Just letting you know. Ethan read the email 3 times. $32,000 per year. Emma would need $128,000 for 4 years, probably more. Sandra had $18,000. Her parents had $10,000. That left $100,000 in loans that Emma would spend decades paying off, the way Ethan had paid off his mother's medical bills. He checked his bank account. 2,147.32. He couldn't help his daughter, couldn't give her the future she deserved, couldn't even contribute 1 month of tuition. Ethan sat at his kitchen table and opened his notebook to a blank page. He began sketching, not theoretically this time, but practically. A real plan, actual steps, tools he would need to build, components he would need to acquire, a timeline, an escape strategy. That night, Ethan Cole stopped pretending he wasn't going to rob the casino. He was going to do it, not because he wanted to be a criminal, not because he enjoyed breaking the law, but because the system had failed him at every turn, and now his daughter would pay the price unless he did something. 18 years of invisible labor hadn't been enough. Playing by the rules hadn't been enough. Working overtime, fixing the impossible, being the best mechanic in the factory, none of it mattered. But understanding that hydraulic system mattered. Knowing what nobody else knew mattered. For once in his life, being invisible was going to be an advantage. For 3 months, Ethan spent nights in the empty factory workshop, building tools that looked like ordinary equipment, but were engineered for one purpose: breaking the casino's hidden hydraulic system. After the factory closed at 6 p.m., he would clock out, eat nearby, then return around 8 p.m. The night guard, an old friend, never questioned his extra maintenance. Working alone, Ethan built 4 devices. The first was a pressure override tool disguised as a snap-on torque wrench. Inside, he installed a custom hydraulic adapter, machined to fit the exact Parker-Hannifin valve used beneath the casino vault. Tested on the factory's Mitchell 47 lift, it flawlessly redirected pressure without triggering sensors. The second was a magnetic sensor jammer, built from old forklift electronics. The casino's mechanical room used outdated motion sensors. Ethan's device froze them for 11 minutes and reset automatically, leaving no suspicious data gaps. Tests on the factory warehouse sensors confirmed it worked perfectly. The third was a hydraulic pressure equalizer, a modified car jack pump with precision regulators. It could raise a several-ton platform 4 inches silently if the pressure increased slowly enough to mimic natural thermal expansion. He refined it during late-night tests using heavy machinery to simulate the vault's weight. The fourth was a steel brace machined to fit exactly between the vault lift's locking rods, holding the floor in place while he worked. It had to be perfect, strong enough to hold 3 tons, precise enough to slide into place without struggle. Sometimes Danny caught him working late. Ethan always said he was fixing old equipment, and Danny always joked, "They'll probably lay you off and you're still doing their repairs." Ethan would answer, "Yeah, probably," and keep working. During this period, he also designed the escape. Stealing the money was only half the problem. Moving it was harder. He couldn't deposit millions, buy expensive items, or attract IRS attention, so he planned to hide the money inside factory shipping crates and send them out with normal shipments to a warehouse he would rent under a fake identity in Oregon. Later, he would retrieve the crates, bury the cash across multiple remote locations, and launder it slowly through small cash jobs and equipment trades. No risks, no flashy spending, just patience. In February 2023, he purchased high-quality fake documents online, $2,000 for a new driver's license and social security card. His new identity, Tom Morrison, age 42. Using it, he rented a warehouse outside Eugene, paying 6 months cash up front. By early March, every tool was built, tested, and refined. The false identity was active. The shipping plan was ready. He knew the casino's security rotations down to the minute. He had everything except the final reason to actually do it. On March 8, 2023, Ethan's supervisor, Mike Brennan, called him into his office. Mike looked exhausted. "The company's doing major layoffs," he said. 40%. You're on the preliminary list." Ethan had suspected this, but hearing it still hit hard. "When?" Ethan asked. "June. Maybe sooner." Severance would be 2 weeks, $4,000, after 18 years. Mike promised a strong reference and apologized, but none of it mattered. Ethan simply nodded and left. That night in his rental house, he ran the numbers again. Severance, savings, retirement, barely $21,000 total. Not enough for his daughter Emma's tuition, not enough for a future. 18 years of loyalty reduced to almost nothing. Ethan opened the notebook, holding his heist plans. Every detail was ready: equipment, identity, transport, timing. He picked a date, Friday, March 17th, exactly 1 week away. His contractor badge should still work. The layoffs hadn't been announced, so no one would link him to anything unusual. He circled the date. In 7 days, he would either walk away with $72 million or go to prison for life. But the alternative, remaining invisible and broke while Emma drowned in debt, felt worse. March 17th wouldn't just be a heist. It would be the day Ethan stopped being the man who fixed the machine and became the man who could beat it. In the week leading up to March 17th, Ethan visited the Grand Sierra Casino 3 times as a customer, carefully memorizing every detail he'd need. On March 12th, a Monday evening, he gambled at slot machines positioned near the service corridor entrance. He lost $40 over 2 hours, a small price for observation. He timed security guard rotations with his phone's stopwatch. Every 45 minutes, like clockwork. The guards followed the same pattern, walked the same roads. On March 14th, a Wednesday afternoon, he ate at the casino restaurant and watched armored truck operations through a window overlooking the service entrance. The trucks arrived at 3:15 a.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays, exactly as he'd observed months earlier. The routine was mechanical, predictable. On March 116th, Thursday evening, less than 24 hours before the heist, Ethan made his final reconnaissance. He arrived at the casino at midnight, walked through the gaming floor, then approached the service entrance. His contractor badge was in his pocket. He could scan it right now, see if it still worked, confirm that the vulnerability was still open. But he didn't. Not yet. If security noticed an unusual late-night scan by a contractor whose job had ended months ago, they might investigate, might deactivate the badge, might close the hole in their system. Instead, Ethan just watched. The young security guard at the desk, absorbed in his phone. The service corridors beyond, empty and quiet. The whole operation running on routine and predictability. Tomorrow night, technically early Saturday morning, he would return, and everything would change. Ethan drove home, his mind strangely calm. He'd expected to feel fear, anxiety, doubt, but instead he felt a cold clarity, like an engineer reviewing calculations before executing a complex procedure. Everything was planned, every variable accounted for. The method was sound. Now he just had to execute. At 2:58 a.m. on March 17, 2023, Ethan Cole pulled into the Grand Sierra Casino service entrance in his old Ford pickup truck. The desert night was cool, the sky clear and black above the bright lights of the casino towers. He sat in the truck for 30 seconds, breathing slowly, checking his mental checklist one final time. Tools, check. Fake ID, check. Contractor badge, check. Escape route memorized, check. His hands were steady on the steering wheel. No trembling, no second thoughts. Ethan grabbed his contractor tool bag, heavier than usual, containing the custom devices he'd spent months building, and walked to the service entrance. Inside, a young security guard sat at the desk, exactly as Ethan had observed during reconnaissance. Early 20s, probably working the graveyard shift because he was new. His name tag said, Mitchell. He was absorbed in his phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. Ethan approached the desk calmly, like this was routine. Late night maintenance, he said, pulling out his contractor badge. Mitchell glanced up briefly, barely making eye contact. Okay, badge. Ethan scanned the badge. The reader beeped. The light turned green. His heart rate increased slightly, but his expression remained neutral. The badge still worked. After 8 months, the casino had never deactivated it. Sign in, Mitchell said, pushing a clipboard across the desk without looking away from his phone. Ethan signed the log as Tom Morrison, using the handwriting style he'd practiced, slightly different from his own, more angular. He noted the time. 2:58 a.m. What's the issue? Mitchell asked, still focused on his phone. Pressure valve in the sub-level mechanical room. Maintenance reported irregular readings. Just need to adjust it. Cool. You know where you're going? Yeah, been here before. Mitchell waved him through without another glance. Ethan walked into the service corridors, his tool bag feeling heavier with each step. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air conditioning hummed. Everything was quiet, mechanical, predictable. He took the stairs to sub-level 1, keeping his head angled down to avoid optimal camera angles he'd memorized. The cameras couldn't be avoided completely, but he could minimize facial recognition by controlling his position. At the restricted door to the mechanical sub-level, Ethan pulled out the duplicated key he'd made months earlier from a wax impression. He'd practiced with the duplicate dozens of times at home, but this was different. This was real. The key slid into the lock. For a moment it stuck, and Ethan felt a spike of adrenaline. Then it turned with a soft click. The door opened. Ethan descended the concrete stairs to the mechanical room. Another lock, another key. This one turned smoothly. Inside, the Mitchell 47 hydraulic lift waited in the darkness, exactly as he remembered. Ethan set down his bag and pulled out a small LED headlamp, the kind mechanics used in dark engine compartments. Red light, less visible than white. He worked quickly now, muscle memory and practice taking over. First, the sensor jammer. He attached it to the mechanical motion logger mounted on the wall, an old General Electric unit from the 1980s that monitored movement in the mechanical room. The jammer's magnetic field would freeze the sensor's readings for exactly 11 minutes, making it appear that nothing was moving even as Ethan worked. He pressed the activation button. A red light blinked twice, then turned solid green. The sensors were frozen. 11 minutes. That was his window. Next, he connected the hydraulic pressure equalizer to the main hydraulic line using the custom adapter disguised as a torque wrench. The connection fit perfectly. He'd machined it to precise specifications. He opened the pressure valve slowly, watching the gauge. The system showed 180 psi, the exact pressure needed to support the vault's weight. Ethan began increasing pressure gradually, adding 1 psi every 10 seconds, slow enough that the change would register as normal thermal expansion in the system's monitoring logs. 181 psi, 182 psi, 183 psi. 3 floors above, inside the sealed vault, the floor began to rise. 4 inches, slow, silent, invisible to every security sensor focused on the vault room itself. The modern security systems, the biometric locks, the motion sensors, the weight-sensitive floors, were all calibrated for the vault room and the vault door. None of them were monitoring the 40-year-old hydraulic system in the forgotten mechanical room below. 184 psi. Ethan watched the pressure gauge with absolute focus. Too fast and he might trigger an alarm. Too slow and he'd run out of time before the sensor jammer reset. When the gauge reached 185 psi, he stopped. He locked the equalizer in place and moved to the locking rod mechanism. The steel locking rods, 2 inches in diameter, designed to hold the vault floor in position, were engaged in their normal lock state. But with the increased pressure, they were under slightly reduced load. Ethan used a second custom tool to manually disengage the hydraulic circuit controlling the rods, then inserted his machine steel brace between them. The brace slid into place perfectly, taking the load. The vault floor was now held in its elevated position by his equipment, not the original system. Ethan checked his watch. 3:06 a.m. 8 minutes since activating the jammer. 3 minutes remaining. He climbed the service ladder mounted on the wall, ascending to the level where the vault floor would be. At the top, he found what he'd seen during his initial discovery, an old access panel from the 1982 construction, covered with decades of dust and paint. This panel had been used during original installation to access the vault floor support system. But after construction, it had been sealed and forgotten. The modern security renovation had never registered its existence. Ethan used a pry tool to carefully lift the panel. It resisted for a moment, paint and rust, then came free with a soft crack. Through the 4-inch gap between the elevated vault floor and its frame, Ethan could see the interior of the vault. Rows of safety deposit boxes along the walls, counting tables in the center, and near the edge, exactly where armored deliveries would place them, 7 sealed money bags. Each bag was canvas, marked with the casino's security seal. Heavy, filled with bundled cash. Ethan extended a telescoping hook, actually a modified automotive grab tool, through the gap. He snagged the first bag and pulled it through the opening. It was heavier than he'd expected, maybe 30 pounds. He pulled out the second bag, then the third. 4, 5, 6, 7. Each bag dropped onto the mechanical room floor with a soft thump. Ethan checked his watch. 3:08 a.m. 10 minutes since activation. 1 minute before the sensor jammer automatically reset. He descended the ladder quickly, his heart pounding now. He had to reverse the process perfectly. Any mistake, any pressure spike, any unusual reading would trigger alarms. He removed the steel brace from between the locking rods. Immediately, he could hear the hydraulic system taking back the load with a subtle change in pressure. He re-engaged the locking rod hydraulic circuit. Then he slowly decreased pressure on the equalizer, watching the gauge. 184 psi, 183 psi, 182 psi. The vault floor lowered back into its original position, silent and controlled. 180 psi. The system was back to normal. Ethan disconnected the equalizer and stowed it in his bag. He removed the pressure adapter. Finally, he disconnected the sensor jammer. The red light blinked twice. The green light turned off. The motion sensors resumed operation. According to their logs, nothing had moved in the mechanical room. There would be no gaps, no anomalies. Just 11 minutes of normal, stable readings. Ethan packed his tools into the bag. The 7 money bags were too large for the tool bag, so he transferred them into a heavy-duty contractor trash bag he'd brought specifically for this purpose. He checked the mechanical room one final time with his headlamp. No tools left behind, no obvious signs of disturbance. The only evidence was microscopic, slight marks on the locking rods, residue on hydraulic connections. Nothing anyone would notice unless they were specifically looking. At 3:14 a.m., Ethan walked up the stairs from the mechanical room, locked the door behind him, and headed toward the service exit. His tool bag was in one hand. The contractor trash bag containing $72 million was in the other. At the service entrance, Mitchell was still at the desk, still absorbed in his phone. "Get it fixed?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Pressure valve was sticking. Should be good now." "Cool." Ethan walked out the door. The cool desert air hit his face. He walked to his truck, loaded the bags into the covered bed, and drove away. No alarms, no sirens, no flashing lights. Just an invisible man leaving through a service door, exactly as he'd planned. Ethan drove directly to the Reno industrial manufacturing plant, arriving at 3:51 a.m. His hands were completely steady on the wheel now. The hard part was done. Now came the methodical execution of the escape plan. The factory was dark except for exterior security lights. Ethan had his key. He'd never turned it in despite technically being laid off. He entered through the side door, the same entrance he'd used thousands of times over 18 years. Inside, the factory floor was silent. The machine stood motionless in the darkness, waiting for the morning shift that wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. Ethan went to the warehouse section where shipping crates were stored. He'd prepared 3 industrial crates weeks earlier, marking them with legitimate shipping codes for a routine delivery to Oregon. He'd even entered them into the factory's shipping database using his system access. Now he transferred the 7 money bags from the contractor trash bag into the 3 crates, padding them with packing material so they wouldn't shift during transport. He sealed each crate with industrial tape and shipping labels. The labels listed the destination as Morrison Industrial Supply in Eugene, Oregon, the warehouse he'd rented under his fake identity. As far as the shipping company knew, this was just another routine commercial delivery. By 4:30 a.m., the crates were sealed, labeled, and placed on the outgoing shipping dock with dozens of other crates awaiting pickup. Ethan cleaned the contractor trash bag, his tool bag, and every surface he'd touched. Then he changed into his regular factory uniform that he kept in his locker and sat at his normal workstation in the break room. At 5:30 a.m., when the early warehouse crew arrived, Ethan was eating a gas station sandwich and drinking coffee from his usual thermos. "Morning, Cole," Danny said, clocking in. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," Ethan said. "Figured I'd get a head start." "You hear about the layoffs? They're saying 40% by June." "Yeah, Mike told me. I'm probably on the list." That's bullshit, man. You're the best mechanic here. Ethan shrugged. Doesn't matter. They'll cut whoever saves them the most money. At 7:15 a.m., a freight truck from Mountain West Logistics arrived to pick up the day's shipments. The driver checked manifest numbers, loaded 42 crates including Ethan's 3, and drove away. Nobody questioned the shipment. It was routine, invisible. Ethan worked his regular shift that day, fixing a hydraulic press that had jammed during the night, helping Danny troubleshoot an electrical issue on the packaging line. Just another Friday at the factory. He went home at 6 p.m., exhausted but calm. The money was in motion, following a legitimate shipping route. The casino wouldn't discover the theft until tomorrow morning when they opened the vault. By then, the money would be in Oregon, and Ethan would be just another mechanic who'd shown up for work, same as always. Saturday morning, March 18, 2023. Patricia Chen arrived at the Grand Sierra Casino at 8:30 a.m., her regular time for weekend vault operations. She'd been floor manager for 6 years, overseeing cash operations with meticulous attention to procedure. At 8:47 a.m., she completed the biometric scan to open the vault. Fingerprint, retinal scan, and access code. The massive door swung open with a hydraulic hiss. Patricia stepped inside to begin the morning count. The vault was organized with military precision, counting tables in the center, safety deposit boxes along the walls, and the high-value money bags in the designated secure zone. Except the money bags weren't there. Patricia stood frozen for 3 seconds, her brain refusing to process what she was seeing. Then she counted the spaces where money bags should be. 7 bags. The entire week's high-value earnings, sealed and awaiting armored transport. Gone. She stepped back out of the vault, her hands shaking as she pulled out her radio. Security, this is Chen. I need Security Chief Torres in the vault immediately. We have a situation. Within minutes, the vault area was locked down. Security Chief James Torres arrived, followed quickly by casino management, then additional security personnel. Torres examined the vault with Patricia, both of them trying to understand what they were seeing. When was the last time you saw the bag? Torres asked. Yesterday afternoon around 4 p.m., standard Friday procedure. 7 bags, all sealed. I personally verified them before closing. Torres checked the vault door's digital logs on his tablet. The door shows no unauthorized openings. Last access was you yesterday at 4:47 p.m., then this morning at 8:47 a.m. That's it. No entries in between. That's impossible, Patricia said. The money didn't just disappear. But Torres was already checking other systems. Motion sensors in the vault room. Negative, no movement detected overnight. Weight-sensitive floor. Negative, no unauthorized weight patterns. Cameras in the vault corridor. Reviewed quickly, showing no one approaching the vault door. By 10:30 a.m., Torres had completed his initial assessment and made the call he'd been dreading. We need to notify the FBI, he told the casino owner. $72 million is missing from a vault that was never opened. This is beyond our capability. FBI Special Agent Sarah Kemp got the call at 11:15 a.m. At 42, with 15 years in complex theft and fraud, she had seen almost everything, but never a vault robbery where the vault was never opened. By 1:00 p.m., she and her team were inside the Grand Sierra Casino, turning a conference room near security into their command center. Security Chief Torres explained the vault's defenses. A 4-ton biometric door requiring 2 matching fingerprints and retinal scans, motion sensors, weight-sensitive flooring, facial recognition cameras, and redundant digital and mechanical logs. None of these systems showed any activity between Friday afternoon and Saturday morning. Kemp examined the vault herself. No vents big enough for a person, no ceiling or floor access, no tunnels. The walls were thick, reinforced concrete. Everything was sealed tight. So the money was here Friday afternoon, she said, and gone Saturday morning, with no door opening and no one inside. For the next weeks, her team interviewed 154 employees, reviewed 3 months of footage, and ran digital forensics on every system. Nothing. No hacking, no spoofed biometrics, no falsified logs, no suspicious contractor access. Patricia Chen, who had checked and locked the bags Friday, cried during questioning, But Kemp believed her. The investigation hit the same wall every time. All systems worked perfectly, yet $72 million had vanished. During a team briefing, agents joked about teleportation. Ground-penetrating radar showed no tunneling. Timing didn't help. The cash was visible during every legitimate vault opening. It was as if someone accessed the room without entering it, a scenario Kemp kept calling impossible. But they were missing something. No one inspected the old mechanical room under the vault, a forgotten space left off modern security blueprints. It wasn't part of the vault zone, so no one thought to look. If they had, they would have found microscopic clues, faint tool marks, rubber traces on hydraulic locking rods, slight residue from manipulated pressure systems. But investigators focused only on modern systems, biometrics, cameras, digital logs. No one checked a 40-year-old hydraulic lift buried under the floor. By May 2023, the case went cold. Kemp's report concluded, unknown subject, undetermined method, likely extensive technical knowledge. The casino upgraded security but never discovered the vulnerability Ethan had used. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole lived quietly. 3 days after the heist, he returned to his factory job. Co-workers joked about the magic vault robbery. Ethan fixed machinery and played along. On March 22nd, he drove to Eugene, Oregon, collected his 3 crates, and transferred the money into vacuum-sealed $2 million packs. Over 3 days, he buried the cash at remote sites across Nevada and Idaho, marking each with encrypted GPS coordinates. By the time layoffs hit in June, Ethan had already planned his exit. He accepted the news calmly, had a farewell drink with co-workers, and 2 weeks later moved to Missoula, Montana. There he bought a small house with inheritance money, took a job teaching engine repair, and blended into the community. He dated a librarian, joined a hiking group, fixed neighbors' equipment, and played weekly poker. Over the next year, Ethan retrieved small amounts of buried cash on carefully timed camping trips, laundering the money slowly through equipment trades and handyman work. By December 2024, $4 million was clean. The remaining $68 million stayed buried, untouched, and safe. He even sent $25,000 to his ex-wife, Sandra, for their daughter, Emma, claiming it came from selling his mother's old property. Emma, now studying mechanical engineering, thanked him often. Ethan told her he was proud. To everyone in Missoula, Ethan Cole was just a quiet, skilled mechanic starting over. No one suspected the truth. He had stolen $72 million and disappeared perfectly.